Hello, beautiful people. This is Xaenex, and this is State of the Kingdom, Episode 5. Super excited that we've gotten here. This week will be myself, GM Obspho, and Ryuchi. What's up, guys? How are you guys doing?
Hey, how's it going?
Hi, doing good.
Sky Tower, the first weekend was this past Saturday, correct?
Yes, it was.
That's correct. Yep.
How was your experience? Your very first, well, probably not Obspho's first experience.
Not my first. But yeah.
But how was yours, Ryuchi?
Well, we didn't have enough guildies going in. We didn't have 40 members online, so we had some randoms, but I don't know. I think a lot of people were able to get to the 4th floor pretty easily, but then the 4th floor itself, it's easy in itself, but it's difficult to do without coordination and organization, and that can be difficult with if your 40-man raid is like half full of randoms, and it can be very difficult. So I think that a lot of people can agree on that, and they're all trying to make it a pre-made 40-man now. So I think that's good, though. It gets more people working together instead of just randomly partying with people. So I think it's nice.
That'll also probably be changing with time as people get more used to it as well.
That's true.
Since generally at the start you're going to have a lot of people who kind of just wander in there and aren't too sure on what they're doing.
Oh yeah, that happened. There's some people that just ran in thinking they could tank the boss just like any other dungeon, and they got one shot and killed. It was pretty funny, though. It was a waste of their lives, but I mean, it was pretty funny.
So for those of you who don't know, like, what the 4th floor or what the Sky Tower even is, could you guys just briefly explain what the Sky Tower is?
I can kind of go into a general overline of what it involves, and as for the rest, it's something you guys can always find out for yourself. But basically, it's a new raid that was recently introduced for up to 40 players, and currently there are 10 floors, I believe. And there's a lot of different stuff in there. There's a lot of different bosses, other challenging things, and it kind of gets a little more difficult the further you go. But it's also a great place to get a lot of cool loot and gear and stuff like that.
If you like strategy or like playing strategy games, I think you'd like Sky Tower, because each floor requires different strategies to be able to successfully complete it, and you need to be able to use all 40 members efficiently, especially in the later floors, to be able and really think about like what classes they are, what skills they have, to be able to do their best. There are some floors where it's better to really use the range classes to the advantage, and there are some where you even need like a specific tank party to go specifically focus on the boss, things like that. It requires strategy, and I enjoy that part of it.
A 40-man raid, like, you don't normally see that in an anime game, much less a game that's been ridiculed for being so easy. What do you guys think of that kind of like jump from like easy content to like this in your face? Wow.
I am so happy. I mean, you heard me last podcast. I was so happy when people were dying in the new dungeons. It was so like, it sounds really evil, but the content has been so easy thus far, and so just having more of a challenge, having something to look forward to, really makes the game for most people, I would say. So I think it was a very good thing.
That's what we want. We want content that appeals to both the casuals and the hardcore players. So, yeah, I mean, while it's initially easy to level, it does get harder as you go further on. That's definitely not all there is to the game. So, yeah, it's definitely nice to have some stuff in there that actually is a challenge for various players.
How long do you guys think the current content will continue to satisfy the players?
That really depends on what you're talking about altogether, because there's some content that it's not really intended to only satisfy players for a fixed period of time. Some of the stuff that's been added, such as fishing, that's something that players should be able to enjoy for as long as the game is around.
That's crazy fun.
It's content that's not really going to go away or become obsolete. And there's other content that's actually intended to be expandable. One good example is actually the Sky Tower itself, which right now there's 10 floors, but there's several more coming and a lot more planned in the future. So even though you may beat the current setup of it, it's just going to keep getting a bit more difficult. And I believe we've mentioned this before in previous podcasts, but how long someone remains satisfied with content, it really does depend on how quickly they go through it. Mm-hmm. So it depends on who you're talking to. But our current content should satisfy the majority of the player base until at least our next patch, which, by the way, is planned for March.
March,
Yeah.
really? Oh, yay!
That's awesome.
March.
Yep.
So
That's our plan. Everybody point and laugh. Yeah, that's our plan currently. But I mean, as always, subject to change. But that's our current plan.
Nice. Oh, last podcast you said the next big update will include Warbow. Does that mean Warbow is coming out in March?
That's the plan.
Because it is subject to change, you gotta
if something does occur and we may not be able to put it out, then please don't come after me for that. You can blame that one on Kuma.
We'll try to hold them back.
Yeah. Although one other thing that I did want to mention, and I'll bring this up because we've talked about this in previous podcasts, is people were asking about some sort of a pre-made PvP system. And what we said about this in the past is this is something that we would like, but it's dependent upon the developers. So what I can tell you right now is we have been discussing that with the developers. There is content planned for the future that will allow for some forms of pre-made PvP. Now, bear in mind that this may not be the current PvP. This current system may not be able to be pre-made, but there is content planned in the future that will have pre-made PvP in it.
That is awesome. So it might be like maybe a new just form of PvP content where like you can.
Yeah, I mean right now it's something that's just being it's still being discussed with them, so we don't have too much information on it at the time. But as we said, that's something that we like the idea of as well, and we've been discussing it with them. It just depends on what they're willing to do.
This kind of just goes to show, I'm really happy that this podcast, got off the ground and got running, because I feel like this is one of the only times where in a free-to-play landscape where players can speak to publishers and the publishers actually listen and then take that straight to the developers, because it's easier for certain other games, like Rift, where the developer and the publisher are one and the same. But it's not as easy for Aeria Games to really have that. So for Aeria to be making that initiative.
Well, that's one thing that a lot of people have to remember, is that we're generally not the developers of the game itself. So while we do have very good working relationships with our developers, a lot of the time, if people will come to us for something, we have to pass that along to the developers ourselves. And there are sometimes things that we would like, but might not work on their end, and it's just something that we have to work with. We can't always put in everything that we'd like, but we definitely listen to all the feedback, and we pass along whatever we think needs to be addressed with them.
This is the first game where I've seen the feedback taken so seriously and something being done about it so quickly as well. So props to you guys. Good job.
Well, we try to do what we can.
New content's coming probably less than a month. Probably in a month.
Woo!
That's
fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. Assuming we don't encounter any major issues.
Exactly.
Okay.
Speaking of major issues, there is a big major issue right now going on
with
Aeria Games Arcanum. It's really disappointing, and it's really frustrating at the same time. And that's the DDoS issues that have been plaguing the landscape for a few weeks now.
Yeah. I've been getting disconnected while I was in arena and dungeons. I get so upset. But
Okay, so first off, we want to make sure that people are clear on precisely what this is, since we recognize there are a lot of people who are not terribly tech savvy, may not be too familiar with all that. Basically, what a DDoS is just think of someone just sending tons and tons and tons of information to a server or website or something like that, which just results in it being flooded by information. And that doesn't mean that it's being hacked, because that's not what a DDoS is. Basically, it's something that can be done to pretty much any server, any website. It's unfortunately part of how the internet works. So, unfortunately, the issue with it is it's not really something that's easily preventable. Usually, when one begins, it's something that you can only mitigate once it actually happens, and it's really unfortunately not that easy to prevent. Especially lately, because I'm not sure if you guys have been following recent news about this, but there have actually been some new methods that people have found lately that basically mean it's really hard to prevent a DDoS without changing the actual infrastructure of the internet itself. Basically, people have found workarounds that make it incredibly easy for someone to just flood pretty much any server or website they wish, which is something that's very, very difficult for anyone to deal with. And basically, as examples, there have been a lot of other companies that have had to deal with this lately, and a lot of them have been really big-name companies as well. Like, for example, Steam was hit by a nasty DDoS in December, I believe. Blizzard has had a few issues with it. I mean, I know Riot has been repeatedly DDoS lately. I mean, and there's been tons of others. Like, just yesterday, I believe Worm Online, I think on their launch day, they received such a huge one that it actually resulted in their hosting provider pulling them offline.
It's really become a whole detriment to gaming in general, because now it's like you can't enjoy the game, and it's very easy to be like, it's Aeria Games, they're cheap and they want to take your money and all this other ignorant and even just misguided stigmas about Aeria Games out there. But it's not an Aeria Games thing. It's not a thing of like Aeria Games having cheap servers or not working on it, or no.
Well, a lot of that comes from the misconception people have about that. They think that means someone's being hacked, or they think that means there's no protection, which is not the case.
It's not at all. It's not even like they're infiltrating your server necessarily. What they're doing is just flooding your server with just a ton of data that the server just cannot keep up with.
Yeah, especially since, as I said, there's been like new advances in that lately, which makes it very, very, very easy for people to do that. I mean, I think just recently there was a record-breaking DDoS for something else, which it set world records for how big it was. Yeah. And the other day we received one for about 20 gigabytes, which is huge amounts. But what we have been doing is we have been addressing this issue with authorities, because this is a major crime. And we've been talking to our contacts with various authorities, as well as looking into this with our engineers to see what we can do about it. Which, I mean, as I said, usually it's not something that can be easily prevented, but it can be mitigated once it's actually happening. So we're working on that, seeing what we can do, but just bear in mind it's something that is unfortunately a part of the internet. So it's not a matter of like having security or whatever. It's more something that we're going to have to address however we can. But for now, we're just going to have to be patient while it's being looked into with the proper authorities.
How long do you think the issues will last? I guess to this extent that it is right now, where there are these random disconnects and things like that. Because if it lasts too long, then I don't know. Do you think there will be something where like the players can be compensated somehow? Or I've had so many where I would just get disconnected during dungeons and such, and I would come back in.
Now, one thing to bear in mind is that not every time you experience lag or disconnect or anything like that, that's not necessarily a DDoS. That's not
true.
necessarily. I mean, we see stuff like this a lot, where we get people contacting us saying your server is lagging so much, and we look at them and they're paying from some very, very poor connection that may be having issues between the server and them. So there's a lot of things that can cause stuff like that, and it's not always on our end, is one thing to bear in mind. A lot of the time, if you're experiencing some sort of lag or something like that and no one else is, it's probably not a server problem. However, that's not to say that there's no things that we can do to work on that as well, because we're always looking into optimizing that. Now, as far as compensation, as far as that goes, that's something that we're looking into. It does depend on whether this remains an issue, because while we're not necessarily responsible for the issue happening, we do feel responsible for making sure our players are able to have an enjoyable experience.
Yeah.
So regardless of the cost. And we do understand it's frustrating, and believe me, it frustrates us as well, and we do want to make sure that you guys are able to continue having fun and staying in game. So that's something that it really depends on what we hear back from people, and what we're able to get after talking to the authorities some more. But it's definitely something we're taking very, very seriously right now.
I think one way to calm people down a bit about these issues is just making it so that even if you get disconnected, you can go back into the dungeon run. I think that's one of the more bigger issues that people have, Bricks, when everybody got disconnected and they go back in, they're like, oh man, I wasted my Infernal Abyss, I wasted my Hell mode. And if something about that could be done, I think people would not be as frustrated with the current issue.
Yeah, I didn't mention it, but we're also discussing it with our developers as well, because we don't want people to be punished for something that's not their fault. We have to look at it from several different angles and make sure that everything would work out first. So it's something that we're looking into. There's a lot of different things we're investigating right now. But a lot of this is also dependent upon, what we hear back from people.
Yeah, as long as you guys are thinking about it, that's great. Thank you.
Absolutely.
The crazy thing about this whole issue is that it's affecting games from the smallest of small to the largest of large. So it's just something that the internet as a whole is going to have to start thinking about, and ways of
Well, it's becoming a lot more prevalent nowadays.
Yeah.
As people find more advancements and ways to exploit how the internet is set up itself, it becomes really a tool for any disgruntled person to just do as a way of acting out. So it's something that a lot of people are becoming more concerned about lately. I'm not talking about just our company. It's really a bit of a big deal. So, if this is something that's addressed, it would have to be kind of on an internet-wide level. But, we do what we can as well. And we do want to make sure that the player is able to have an enjoyable experience. But, we can only do as much as we can. We'll see what we can do in the future. For now, just sit tight. We're doing our best. And, we'll see what happens in the future once we've finished talking to more people and investigating a few more things.
Alright, so guys, let's jump right into our weekly questions.
Yay!
Alright,
bring them on.
The first one for this week is from Sparkle. They asked, can you explain to us how server testing works?
Yeah, we definitely wanted to go into this one because a lot of people aren't too clear on how we do our testing for new patches. But basically, the way it usually starts off is, obviously, we have our own test server, which is where we test all the content before we bring it live. And usually, we're going to receive a basic outline of the content that our developers have added to the test server. Usually, this content is not in English, so we first need to relocalize it so that we can actually read what we're testing. After that, we're generally going to test all the content on both our GM characters and naturally progressed characters, because we need to make sure it works as it should. So we have to do that because sometimes things work for GMs that don't work for regular characters. So we need to make sure that, we're not letting anything slip through. And finally, after that, we're going to run through a checklist of most common things we need to check to make sure that they're not being affected by content that's been added. One thing that a lot of people aren't aware of is content will affect each other in the oddest way. It's all coding, and you never know where when you put in one thing, something else completely unrelated might pop up. So usually during this period, there's a lot of back and forth between us, between our developers, between our localization team, because every patch we get, we usually find a ton of bugs, and we have to send them off to the developers to be fixed. And there's a lot of that going back and forth while we're trying to make sure that we can get it all set up in time for the patch to be released. Usually, this will generally address the vast majority of bugs that we find during our testing process. However, it should be expected that there will always be some that slip through the net. I mean, unfortunately, I think a lot of people are in the misconception that a game should be perfect, which, unfortunately, when you have a game of this scope, entailing so many different things, there's always going to be some issues. It doesn't mean we're not addressing them, it just means that there's going to be some bugs. And sometimes we do have to decide on if an issue is minor enough or if it's major enough that we should delay a patch for. Because if you find issues that are slight annoyances but you can fix soon after the patch, it may still be worth it going live with a patch, and because you don't want to have a lot of players that are waiting for new content when there's a minor issue that can be easily fixed afterwards. And one other thing to bear in mind is that sometimes issues actually interact differently on our live server than they do on test, which can also lead to interesting difficulties. But that's kind of the basic overview of how we normally go through new content when we get it.
Ruchi, would you like to grab the next question?
Oh yeah, sure. Let's see. Xaenex09 says, will there be a housing system? Oh, snap this question! Okay. If so, will we be able to sell stuff in it? We can sell stuff? Will furniture be interactive or just for display purposes?
Now bear in mind, most of that is just the player asking the question themselves, so don't expect any of that. But what I can say is this is something we're currently talking to the developers on. It is content that we definitely want in the future. Right now, we don't have solid information on it. So what I can tell you is that we're talking it over. We'd like it. Can't tell you more this time. But once we have more info on that, we will be releasing it so that players are able to get a good idea of what's coming up.
And Polar asks, when will the main questline for 55 to when will the main questline for level 55 to 60 be coming out?
Currently we actually feel there's sufficient content for players to reach level 60. I mean, leveling is initially intended to be easy, but it shouldn't be a cakewalk all the way up. And we actually can see there's a lot of players who've actually already reached level 60. So we feel that currently players should have enough content to be able to get there. However, there will be further storyline progression in the future. I don't, off the top of my head, know which patch that will be coming in, but there will be further quest lines in the future that should help you get up higher.
Yeah, I think that question mainly revolves around the fact that they want the road from level 50 to 60 to be easier, because a lot of people much prefer questing over grinding dungeons.
I think it's also because with this previous patch, we were able to get equipment and stuff up to 65. I've seen 65 golds and such, but they're hoping that with this new content for like the 55 to 60, that it'll also bring higher level gear as well, just like the previous patch has done. I think that's what more people are interested in.
Yeah, and that's definitely an understandable thing. But I mean, again, that's something that's definitely going to be coming in the future. For now, there's definitely sufficient ways for people to get up there, and there's definitely a lot of gear that you can get around that level, but we definitely understand why people want there to be more. We definitely hear you on that, and we'll keep talking it over with people.
Alright guys, so before we end the podcast, there are 2 points I want to touch on. We started receiving questions through the YouTube page for the episode. I do have to note that please do not submit your questions there, but rather submit your questions on the Aeria Games thread, which is linked in the description below this video, because it's where all the questions are. It just makes everything easier. Everything's going to be in one place in this one thread. It is already sticky, so it's easy to keep up with. And yeah, so if you ask your question on the YouTube page or any other page, it will not be included in any episode whatsoever, because you did not put it on the Aeria Games thread. Second point, we are looking for panelists. It's been great having Richie, but the past couple weeks there's been scheduling difficulties, and it turns out that there are a lot more shy people than I imagined. So if you're not shy, if you do have a good amount of knowledge about our kingdom, if you've been following the game, playing the game for quite a while, since even Founders Beta, we would like to have you on, no matter what server you play. Even as long as you're like above level 40, so you actually know the content that we mostly speak about. Yeah, we're just looking for panelists. You don't have to have perfect English. We're not looking for scholars. I myself do not have a perfect dialect with English. So we're not looking for any scholars or anything like that. We just want to hear the voice of the community. Exactly.
We want to hear more of you guys out there. We know there's plenty of you. And I don't actually bite. So please, just let us know if you're interested. And absolutely.
Yes, so we will see you next week. Hasta la vista. Or something.
Bye.
Later. Take care.
Bananas. Please check out the featured artist for this series.